Okay, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to the final episode of this push-pull legs installment of the Science Applied series. After this, I'm going to go through a few upper body, lower body, and full body workouts. So the series isn't just over yet. But before we dig into this workout itself, I just want to quickly let you guys all know that my intermediate to advanced push-pull legs hypertrophy program is now available on my website. So you can check that out at the first link in the description box below, and I'll have a little more on that at the end of the video. So anyway, in this video, we're covering the second lower body workout for the week. And remember that in our push-pull leg split, we're hitting the quads, hamstrings, glutes, and calves twice per week, since the scientific literature shows that hitting each body part at least twice per week is better for growth than only hitting each body part once per week. Now, as usual, before we jump into any lifting, we're gonna do 5 to 10 minutes of low to moderate intensity cardio on your machine of choice. Lately, I've been using the elliptical or Stairmaster because I don't find they have the same impact as a treadmill and allow me to break a sweat sooner than a bike. From here, we're gonna jump into 2 or 3 minutes of dynamic stretching. I do a full summary of my warm-up protocol in the push-pull legs hypertrophy program. But in summary, according to a 2010 review on the performance effects of static stretching and dynamic stretching, while static stretching before training is generally associated with performance detriments, dynamic stretching has either a neutral or beneficial effect. And then to round out the workout, we're doing some light foam rolling, just focusing on tight areas. So for me, I find my inner thighs and lower back just feel so much more mobile and loosened up after a few minutes of foam rolling. And while the literature is mixed on foam rolling for reducing muscle soreness and improving range of motion, I personally lean toward the data suggesting that it does help in both cases, and this is also more in line with my personal experience with it. So at the very least, there isn't anything to lose from foam rolling, so lately I've been throwing it in before all my lower body sessions. Okay, so we're kicking the actual workout off with 4 sets of 4 reps on the deadlift. Now the deadlift is actually quite controversial for hypertrophy for I think 3 main reasons. The first being that the powerlifting style deadlift really only has a concentric contraction. I mean, you could slow the eccentric down, but in my experience, that just increases the risk of injury. So for proper deadlift form, you want to lower and guide the bar straight down with your hands touching the bar, but not really actively resisting the negative like you would on other exercises. Now, since the research has shown that eccentric contractions are generally more important than concentric contractions for hypertrophy, many people count this as a strike against the deadlift. A strike 2 against the deadlift is that it doesn't have the greatest range of motion. Compared to the squat, your hips start higher off the floor, so the lowest you can get, or should get, is to about a half squat starting position. And the supposed final blow for the deadlift is that it's harder to recover from than other exercises, meaning you may not be able to do as much volume on other stuff because you need more time to recover from these. Now, it isn't so much that I think that these are bad arguments against the deadlift, but more so I think they just undermine the role of combining exercises. I think the concern about the lack of an eccentric contraction kind of diminishes if you combine the deadlift with other eccentric focused exercises, which we'll do later in the workout. And the concern about range of motion, I think, is a bit exaggerated. While I agree that the bulk of the evidence is in support of greater ranges of motion for hypertrophy, some evidence does suggest that training through a limited range of motion might stimulate similar results to full range of motion exercise. And I think that, again, when combining the deadlift with other exercises that do have a large range of motion, this concern kind of goes away as well. Now, as for the recovery cost of deadlifting, I think that this ultimately comes down to a myriad of factors, namely how heavy you're deadlifting and how often you're deadlifting. But I think that with this routine, doing a deadlift from the floor once per week with submaximal loads shouldn't be too taxing for any intermediate to advanced level trainee, to the point that it starts to impair their other work to a detrimental degree. So it may be a bit of my powerlifter bias coming through here, but I think we shouldn't only care about building muscle. I think we should also care about gaining strength. And given just how well these two adaptations are correlated in the literature, I'm not sure we should always be trying to tease them apart. And given the ability for raw deadlift strength to carry over to other exercises, I think having a strength base here makes perfect sense, even if your main goal is to add size. When we recorded the video, I actually had a bruised rib, so I wasn't able to lift my usual weight, but in general, you want to pick a load that will have you at about an RPE of 6 or 7, so you'll want to make sure you're not taking these too close to failure, and if you know your 1 rep max, something around 75% 1RM should get you in the right ballpark. Now, as for the sumo versus conventional deadlift, you'll see that I'm pulling with a wide sumo stance here, meaning my arms are inside my legs and my toes are pointed out toward the plates. And the main reason for this is that I'm just simply stronger stronger with a sumo stance. At my best, I can pull about 50 pounds more in sumo than in conventional, which is why I go with it. But borrowing from a fantastic Greg Nuckols article on this, there are really only two differences between conventional and sumo. Sumo deadlifts work your quads more, and conventional deadlifts tax your spinal erectors more. It's a common misconception that sumo deadlifts are better than conventional deadlifts at hitting the glutes, but this was debunked by Brett Contreras' research long ago. They're actually about the same. Okay, so up next, we're doing 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps on the deficit Bulgarian split squat. This is a movement you probably haven't seen me do much on the channel, but I think it complements the deadlift perfectly because unlike the deadlift, here you get a massive range of motion plus a large degree of stretch for a huge hypertrophic stimulus on the glutes, quads, and to some degree, the hamstrings. So what you want to do is set up the exercise by lowering the Smith machine bar to the first or second lowest notch, and then put the laces of your back shoe over the pad. Stand on a plate to further increase the range of motion, and place it slightly out to the side to allow for some hip external rotation, which will further increase the range of motion. Now, another suitable exercise here would be a front squat, since one 2016 study found that despite requiring lighter loads, the front squat may provide a similar training stimulus to the back squat. So for this reason, I think it's a great exercise to pair with the deadlift because of the relatively high recovery cost of deadlifting and the comparatively low recovery cost of front squatting. But again, you'd only have to pick one of the two, either the Bulgarian split squat or the front squat at this point in the workout. All right, up next, we're doing 3 sets of 15 reps on the hip thrust. Now you may notice that here I haven't set up a rep range, rather just a single rep count of 15. And I do this in the hypertrophy program as well for some exercises. And the rationale here is to have you focus on technique and mastering execution before adding any reps or any weight. So you may not add any weight to this movement for a few weeks, but instead just improve aspects of your form, like keeping your chin and rib cage tucked down and only moving from the hips. So try not to extend your lower back and harvesting a stronger mind-muscle connection. And once you feel like you've gotten the technique down, then you can add weight, but only once you feel like the RPE has dropped by 1 point. Or in other words, once it feels about 10% easier than the previous week. And again, normally I'd be going heavier here if not for my bruised rib. For some reference, I think your 1 rep max hip thrust should be at least as strong as your 1 rep max deadlift. Of course, master the form before loading the weight, but still don't limit yourself on your strength potential with these. And as I've mentioned in several videos, the hip thrust is amazing for the glutes because, as shown by Worrell and colleagues back in 2001, the glutes fire hardest when in or near full hip extension. And since the hip thrust loads the glutes in or near full hip extension, it's not surprising that later research from Dr. Brett Contreras found that the barbell hip thrust activates the glutes to a greater degree than the back squat. Okay, so we're gonna blast through these final 4 exercises a bit more quickly. So next we've got the 3-second eccentric goblet squat for 3 sets of 15 reps. And again, here we're emphasizing the eccentric on the quads, both to offset that sort of eccentric deficit on the deadlift, and because slow eccentrics allow for a similar hypertrophic response with the use of lighter loads. Now, of course, this doesn't always mean to use eccentric focused training, but just that it can have a place in your routine. This movement is also going to help improve the skill aspect of squatting. So you want to maintain a very upright torso, let your knees travel as far forward as they need to. I've covered this idea in a Myth Bust Monday video, which I'll link below. And you can optionally elevate your heels, either with squatting shoes or by standing on a 2.5 pound plate, especially if your ankle mobility is limited. Then we're moving on to 3 sets of 10 reps on the enhanced-eccentric lying leg curl. Now you'll remember from the last pull day science applied video that according to a 2011 NSCA report from Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, eccentric strength is generally 20 to 50% greater than concentric strength. So to optimize the arguably more anabolic eccentric contraction, we're going to take advantage of this strength curve by having a training partner apply manual resistance to the eccentric component. If you don't have a training partner, you can simply slow down the eccentric to about a 3 to 4 second lowering phase. And finally, we're hitting 3 sets of 30 reps on the machine seated hip abduction. I think hip abductions are an underrated exercise, especially for men, given that they're essentially unmatched when it comes to hitting that often neglected glute medius muscle. and the upper portion of the glutes as well. High reps like this will generate significant metabolic stress, which according to Schoenfeld's three-pronged hypertrophy model might be valuable for muscle gain. And since it's at the end of the workout, there isn't much of a recovery concern on follow-up exercises. So keep your butt planted on the seat and really focus on a mind-muscle connection with your glutes. And many people find that touching the area that they're trying to activate is helpful here. Also, this exercise may have technique carryover to the squat in terms of helping train the knees to stay out and prevent potentially dangerous excessive knee valgus. Basically, it trains the knees against caving in. And to round out the workout, we're doing 3 sets of 10 reps on the standing calf raise. Nothing too fancy here, but you just want to make sure that you're stretching and pausing at the bottom and then pressing all the way up onto your toes. And I do find that doing these barefoot is a more comfortable way to get a true full range of motion. So again, I'll just quickly tally up the volume here for both of these workouts if you'd like to pause and read for more on volume. And if you'd like to have everything covered in these 6 episodes packaged into a fresh and new training routine, make sure you check out my push-pull legs hypertrophy program. This is an 80+ page manual covering everything from anatomy, the program variables, the science behind everything. And there's a full 16-week 2-block training program with email customer support if you have any questions. So it's going to be $29.99 for the first week of launch, and then the regular price will be $39.99 from there. And I should also say that this program does borrow from many of the scientific principles that I've discussed in this series, but the workouts aren't exactly the same as these workouts. I wanted to have something that was going to be kind of fresh and new, even though it is grounded in some of the same science and does use some of the same techniques. So anyway, that's going to be the first link down there in the description if you'd like to check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate your support on this series. It's been a lot of fun for me to make so far. And yeah, please leave me a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you happen to be new. And I'll see you guys all here in the next video.